Hi, Guy. Tonight we are walking under a sky thick with falling pink snow. It's not snow, of course, but a blizzard of cherry blossoms, each petal a soft, silent whisper against your silk robes. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and sweet flowers as you join a long, winding procession of people making their way up a mountain path towards the distant, rhythmic clang of a temple bell. This is the ancient past, a world lit by paper lanterns and ruled by decree. A royal heir has been born, a cause for celebration across the kingdom. But for one village, this joy brings a crippling grain tax to fund the festivities. And a shy teacher named Min-ju is unexpectedly pulled from her quiet life and forced onto a dangerous path to ensure her family's duty is met. Honestly, with the state of ancient medicine, you probably wouldn't survive this journey anyway. A twisted ankle could be a life-altering catastrophe. If you enjoy drifting off to these little windows in time, a gentle press of the like button and a subscribe are always deeply appreciated. Let me know in the comments where and what time you're listening from. Now, settle in. Close your eyes. The gravel crunches softly under your woven straw sandals. You are Min-ju. Your world is usually the size of a single room, smelling of ink, aging paper, and the sweet milky breath of the half-dozen children you teach. As a teacher, and a woman at that, your domain is small but complete. You guide clumsy little hands as they form their first characters, the brush strokes thick and unsteady. Just this morning, a boy named Juan proudly showed you his painting of a tiger. It had the stripes, yes, but the body of a startled melon and the expression of a man who'd just been told his roof was on fire. You'd praised his ferocious beast, thinking privately that it was a masterpiece destined for the Abstract Terror collection. This is your life. Quiet, contained, and seasoned with your own silent, shy humor. But the world outside your small schoolhouse has a way of barging in. Yesterday it came in the form of a royal messenger, his horse kicking up dust and his voice booming with an importance that made the whole village fall silent. A prince was born. Long live the king. Long live the new heir. There was a brief, polite cheer, followed by the part everyone was actually waiting for. The celebration. A grand 10-day festival at the Bangyun Temple, a gift from the people to the royal family. A gift, of course, that the people were expected to pay for. The decree announced a special tax, a collection of grain from every household, to be delivered to the temple granaries. A collective, weary sigh seemed to ripple through the crowd. You felt it too, a tightening in your chest. Then came the part that turned your quiet world upside down. Your family name was read aloud. Your distant cousin, Choi Sang, a man who had clawed his way into a minor government position as a grain tax collector, was in charge of this district. And because you are one of the few literate people in his extended family, you have been graciously invited, which is to say, commanded, to assist him in keeping the records. Your job is to walk the trail with the collectors and mark off the deliveries in a ledger. Just like that, your life of quiet ink stains was over, replaced by a journey you never asked for. You thought to yourself, wonderful, a royal baby. I do hope they sent out a registry. I'd love to get them a sack of my neighbor's entire yearly harvest. And so, here you are, the cherry blossom trail. It's painfully beautiful, a cruel irony. The path is a tunnel of pink and white, the branches so heavy with blossoms they droop down, brushing your shoulders as you pass. Sunlight dapples through the canopy, making the whole world feel soft and dreamlike. But the dream is punctuated by the grunts of men hauling heavy sacks of rice and barley, the creak of wooden cartwheels, and the low murmur of unhappy voices. You clutch your precious ledger to your chest, the paper and ink feeling like the only familiar things in this strange, moving world. Up ahead, you see him, Choi Sang. Your cousin. Even from a distance, he radiates impatience. He's standing with his hands on his hips, his official's hat slightly askew, yelling at a farmer whose cart has lost a wheel. He is not a large man, but his voice makes up for it. As you get closer, you can hear his words, sharp and clipped. Do you think the royal court waits for your shoddy cart? The prince will be a man before this grain arrives. Fix it now! The farmer, a man twice Choi Sang's age with a face like a worn leather map, just bows his head and mutters an apology. You feel a familiar knot of discomfort. This is Choi Sang's way. He sees life as a series of obstacles to be shouted at until they move. You approach him cautiously, as one might approach a sleeping bear. A very, very angry sleeping bear. Cousin, you say, your voice barely a whisper. He whirls around, his frustration immediately finding a new target. Minju, there you are. I was beginning to think you'd decided to write a poem about the cherry blossoms instead of doing your duty. Quote, you look down at your feet, offering a small, apologetic bow. The path is crowded, Cousin sang. Quote, the path is full of excuses, he snaps, snatching the ledger from your hands. He thumbs through the pages, his brow furrowed. This is it? This is all you've marked off? We're already halfway to the temple. He looks at you, his eyes narrowed. He has the gentle disposition of a hornet whose nest has just been used for soccer practice. You're too soft for this, Minju. This isn't a classroom. These people, he gestures dismissively at the struggling farmers, will take advantage of a gentle hand. You need to be firm. He jabs a finger at a name on the list. Look, Jungnan. The thatcher. Still nothing from him. Probably hiding his grain, claiming his roof has a sudden, urgent need for repair. A funny man, they say. Shy, too. A perfect excuse to avoid his duty. He shoves the ledger back into your chest. Your job is to mark the payments, not make friends. Understand? You nod, the blush creeping up your neck. You understand perfectly. You are a quiet stream forced to flow alongside a raging river. All you can do is try not to be swept away. You adjust the pack on your shoulders and continue your trek up the beautiful, terrible path, the weight of the ledger now feeling heavier than any sack of grain. The final leg of the journey is the steepest. The mountain path narrows, and the cheerful canopy of cherry blossoms gives way to solemn, towering pines that claw at the sky. The air grows thin and cool, carrying the scent of pine needles and ancient stone. The distant clang of the temple bell is no longer distant. It's a deep, resonant hum that seems to vibrate in your bones, a constant physical presence. Each toll feels like a heartbeat for this grand, imposing place. Finally, you see it. The Bong Yun Temple. It doesn't sit on the mountain. It seems to grow out of it. A massive, ornate gate, its wood the color of dried blood and held together by black iron, stands guarded by two stone statues of mythical beasts, their faces locked in silent, permanent snarls. Beyond the gate, the world transforms. The rustic earthen path gives way to a sprawling courtyard of meticulously raked white gravel. The scale of it all makes you feel impossibly small, like a single, forgotten character on a vast, unread scroll. The celebration is a beautiful, chaotic storm for the senses. Hundreds of paper lanterns, painted with cranes and peonies, hang from every available eave, their light a soft, warm glow against the approaching twilight. The air is thick with the sweet, heavy smoke of incense spiraling from bronze burners as tall as a man. Monks in gray and saffron robes move with a serene, unhurried grace, their low, rhythmic chanting a constant undercurrent, to the lively music of flutes and drums played by musicians in vibrant silk costumes. Nobles and aristocrats drift through the courtyard like exotic fish, their robes a dazzling river of crimson, sapphire, and gold. They murmur to each other behind painted fans, their laughter as light and delicate as the cherry blossoms you left behind. You watch a group of ladies admire a tapestry depicting the birth of the prince, their fingers tracing the exquisite gold thread. They seem to exist in a different world, a world where a grain tax is an abstract concept, a minor detail in the grand pageantry of their lives. Your world, however, is a designated corner of the courtyard, where the real work is being done. Here, the air smells not of incense, but of sweat and dust. Weary farmers, their faces grim and their backs bowed, line up to heave their sacks of rice and barley onto massive, growing pyramids of grain. This is the gift from the people. It looks less like an offering and more like a surrender. The contrast is a silent scream in the middle of the festive noise. You see the tired faces of the men and women who unload their livelihood, their entire year of back-breaking labor. Then watch as they are given a single small rice cake for their trouble, before being ushered away. You think, with a grimace, that it's like thanking a tree for its wood by giving it a toothpick. Here, Joseon barks, jarring you from your thoughts. He points to a small, rickety table set up near one of the grain mountains. This is our post. Do not move from it. I'm going to find that good-for-nothing thatcher. He stomps off, disappearing into the throng. A small, angry storm cloud in a sea of placid silk. You sit at the table, the ledger open before you. You dip your brush in the inkstone, the familiar act a small comfort in this overwhelming place. One by one, the heads of households from your district approach, state their name, and point to their contribution. You find their name on the scroll, make a neat black mark beside it, and give them a polite, formal nod. You try not to meet their eyes. You can feel their resentment, their weariness. You are the face of their hardship, the one holding the official record of their loss. Each stroke of your brush feels like you're drawing a line through their family's comfort for the next year. After an hour, the flow of people thins. Most of the farmers from your village have made their delivery and have either started the long walk home or are lingering at the edges of the courtyard, watching the festivities with a hollow curiosity. You are alone with your ledger, the chanting of the monks and the distant music washing over you. A heavy book for such a delicate person. The voice is soft, and so close it makes you jump. A man is standing beside your table, though you never heard him approach. He is tall and lean, with the wiry strength of someone who works with their hands. His own hands are resting on your table, and you notice they are calloused and scarred, with bits of dried straw caught under the nails. He has a kind, open face, but his eyes dart around nervously, never quite settling on you. He keeps his gaze fixed on the ledger. This must be him. You are Jungnan, the thatcher, you state, your voice quieter than you intended. He gives a short, nervous laugh, finally flicking his eyes up to meet yours for a brief second before looking away again. Famous, am I? I'd have preferred it to be for the quality of my roofs, not the emptiness of my grain sack. He gestures vaguely toward the celebration. Quite the party. I imagine the royal baby is sleeping soundly through all this. Or perhaps the drumming is a new technique to help with colic. His humor is unexpected, a little flicker of warmth. Despite your cousin's warnings, you feel a pang of sympathy for this shy man. He seems less like a defiant criminal, and more like someone deeply uncomfortable in his own skin. You have come to make your delivery? You ask, reaching for your brush. He leans in closer, a conspiratorial glint in his restless eyes. Delivery? Oh no, I'm just admiring the architecture. See that roof on the main hall? He points with his chin. Beautiful tile work. But a good thatch roof breathes better. Lets the spirits of the house come and go as they please. Tile just traps them, makes them grumpy. He taps a finger on your ledger near his own name, which stands out for its lack of a checkmark. This is a trap too, isn't it? Traps everyone. His words hang in the air, no longer humorous. There's a bitter edge to them, a low thrum of anger beneath the shy exterior. You look from his face to his name on the page. He has a connection to the celebration, Choi Sang had said. Resentment. It is my duty, you say softly, feeling the need to defend your role, as small as it is. Duty is a heavy cloak, Jeongnan says, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And it's always the people with the barest shoulders who are forced to wear the heaviest one. He smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. My father was a roofer, too. A good one. He was conscripted, graciously invited, to help repair the palace roof before the last royal wedding. A gift from the Craftsman Guild to the king. He pauses, his gaze turning distant and hard. He fell. They sent my mother a scroll of commendation for his, quote, honorable sacrifice. It didn't keep the rain out of our house that winter. The story lands like a stone in your gut. Suddenly, his resentment isn't an abstract thing. It has a face. A history. It's the face of a boy whose father was replaced with a piece of paper. I'm sorry, you stammer, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. He shrugs, the tension leaving his shoulders as he forces another shy smile. Oh, don't be, it's an old story. He glances around, then his eyes fix on your inkstone. An honest mistake can happen to anyone, can't it, teacher? Before you can process his words, his elbow accidentally nudges the small water pot next to your inkstone. Water sloshes across the open page of the ledger. You gasp, grabbing for the scroll, but it's too late. The fresh ink of the last dozen marks bleeds and runs, turning the neat characters into a blurry, indecipherable mess. The water pools around his own unmarked name, leaving it pristine, but soaking the page around it. Oh, clumsy me! Jiangnan exclaims, his voice full of a theatrically shy panic. He backs away, wringing his hands. So sorry, I'm just so clumsy. Always have been. Quote, but as you stare at the ruined page, at the deliberate puddle of water, you know it was no accident. It was a small, precise act of rebellion, An attack not with a sword, but with a water pot. Jeongnan! The roar cuts through the courtyard. Choi Sang is striding towards you, his face a mask of fury. He has seen the whole thing. Jeongnan doesn't run. He simply turns to face your cousin, his shoulders slumping into a posture of meek submission, but you see the ghost of a defiant smile playing on his lips. Cousin Choi Sang, the Thatcher says, his voice a mumble, just admiring the festivities. Quote, "You are admiring nothing. You are a debtor and a vandal," Choi Sang bellows, grabbing Jeongnan by the front of his worn tunic. "You will pay what you owe, and you will pay for this damage." Quote. Jeongnan doesn't struggle. He just looks past your cousin, his eyes finding yours. The humor is gone now, replaced by a cold, quiet warning. "Be careful with that book, teacher," he says, his voice low and clear, meant only for you. Ink can be washed away, but some debts can't. Choi Sang shoves him away. "Get out of my sight! I will have the guards deal with you." Jeongnan gives a mock bow, a gesture of deference that is deeply insulting, and then melts back into the crowd, disappearing as silently as he arrived. You are left staring at the spoiled ledger, your heart hammering against your ribs. The grand celebration, with its music and its lanterns, suddenly feels cold and menacing. The weight of the ledger in your hands is no longer just the weight of your duty. It is now the weight of a secret, of a quiet war declared in whispers, and of a debt that has nothing to do with grain. Choi Sang's face was a thundercloud. He kicked at a loose stone, the sharp sound swallowed by the festive din. "Incompetent," he spat, not at you, but at the world in general. He snatched the soggy ledger from your hands and held it as if it were a dead rat. "Look at this, a complete shambles. How am I supposed to present this to the temple stewards? They'll think I can't even manage a single village." He glared at you, his anger a physical force. "This is your fault. Your soft heart and clumsy hands have made me a laughingstock." Quote, before you could form a reply, a new sound pierced the air, sharp and panicked. It wasn't the joyous clamor of the festival, but a shriek of genuine alarm. It came from the direction of the main hall, where a special dais had been erected to display the most significant offerings. All heads turned. The music faltered, then stopped altogether. The chanting of the monks ceased, leaving a sudden, ringing silence filled only with fearful whispers. You saw a man in the fine silk robes of a merchant guildmaster staggering back from the dais, his face pale as bleached linen. He was pointing a trembling finger at an empty pedestal. "It's gone!" he cried, his voice cracking. "The golden boar, it's gone!" Quote. A wave of panic rippled through the courtyard. Guards in lacquered armor, who had been standing at ease, suddenly drew their swords, their expressions grim. The main gate was slammed shut with a deafening boom, trapping everyone inside. The celebration was over. The temple courtyard was now a cage. You had seen the golden boar earlier. It was a masterpiece of the goldsmith's art, a statuette no bigger than a winter melon, but crafted from solid gold. It depicted a wild boar, its head lowered as if to charge, its tiny eyes made of polished black jade. An offering from the powerful Merchants Guild, it was a symbol of strength and prosperity for the newborn prince, and by far the most valuable single item presented. Its theft was not just a crime. It was an insult to the royal family, an act of shocking audacity. Choi Sang forgot the ruined ledger instantly. His eyes, which had been burning with petty frustration, now lit up with a different kind of fire. Ambition. This was a crisis, and in a crisis, a man with a shred of authority could make himself important. He straightened his official's hat and puffed out his chest, striding towards the commotion as if he'd been personally summoned. You, however, felt a cold dread seep into your bones. The open, festive space had become claustrophobic. You were trapped in a courtyard with hundreds of strangers and one thief, and you knew, with a certainty that made your stomach clench, that justice in a place like this was often swift, brutal, and not particularly concerned with the truth. The head of the temple guard, a broad-shouldered man with a scar that cut through one eyebrow, began barking orders. The nobles were separated, their initial shock turning to indignant murmurs. The commoners, the farmers, the servants, the craftsmen like Jeongnan, were herded into a tight, nervous pack on the gravel, like sheep awaiting a wolf. You and your little table were caught in the middle. Choi Sang conferred with the guard captain, gesturing emphatically, his voice low but urgent. He kept glancing back at you, a strange, calculating look in his eyes. He saw the stolen boar not as a tragedy, but as a ladder. You watched him, a familiar, bitter thought forming in your mind. Some men see a fire and reach for a bucket. Choi Sang reaches for a marshmallow on a stick. The search was clumsy and humiliating. Guards went through personal belongings, upturning baskets and patting down robes with rough, indifferent hands. They found nothing. The golden boar was not something one could easily hide in a sleeve. The thief was either incredibly clever or had already found a way to secret it away. The tension mounted with every passing minute. Then, Choi Sang strode back towards you, his face set in a mask of grim satisfaction. The guard captain and 2 other armed men followed in his wake. They were not looking around the courtyard anymore. They were looking directly at you. "There," Choi Sang said, his voice loud enough for everyone in the tense silence to hear. He pointed not at you, but at the ground near your table. Lying in the white gravel, almost invisible, was a small, curved blade with a worn wooden handle. A weeding sickle. A common tool. One that nearly every farming family in your village owned. "That does not belong to a merchant or a nobleman," the guard captain grunted, picking it up. He held it up for all to see. "That sickle," Choi Sang continued, his voice ringing with false authority, "belongs to a farmer from my district. The same district that has been slow to pay its tax. The same district full of malcontents." He paused, letting the implications sink in. Then he turned and fixed his gaze on you, his eyes cold and hard. "And who has been overseeing the ledger for this district? Who was sitting right here, where the thief must have passed?" "My own cousin, Minju." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Your blood ran cold. He couldn't be. But he was. "She created a diversion," he proclaimed, holding up the ruined ledger. "Spilling water, spoiling the records, acting the part of the clumsy fool to draw attention away while her accomplice, one of the farmers she is so sympathetic to, stole the offering." Quote, "It was a lie, a monstrous, elegantly constructed lie. It took all the disparate pieces, your shyness, the confrontation with Jiangnan, the spoiled ledger, the random sickle, and wove them into a tapestry of treason." "Cousin, no," you whispered, standing up so quickly your stool clattered to the ground. Your heart hammered against your ribs, a frantic drum against the sudden silence. "Do not call me cousin," he boomed, taking a step closer. "You have brought shame upon our family name. You have conspired against the throne. Seize her." Quote. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. All eyes were on you. You saw suspicion in the faces of the nobles, fear in the eyes of the farmers, and cold duty in the expressions of the guards as they moved towards you. In that moment, the shy teacher in you wanted to curl up and disappear, to let the injustice wash over you because fighting it seemed impossible. You were a small stream, and this was a tidal wave. But then you thought of your family, your gentle mother, who taught you your first characters. Your father, a quiet farmer who worked until his hands bled to give you the chance to study. Their faces, their honor, their entire lives were being threatened by Choi Sang's vicious ambition, and deep within you, a core of iron you never knew you possessed began to glow hot. "Wait," you said. Your voice was not a whisper. It was clear and steady, cutting through the silence with surprising force. The guards paused, their hands hovering near your arms. You looked directly at Choi Sang, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. "Your story has a certain creativity, cousin. Almost as creative as Juan's painting of the melon tiger. But it has a flaw." You turned to the guard captain, ignoring Choi Sang completely. "Sir," you said, your voice respectful but firm, "my cousin claims I created a diversion." Yet he himself was the one shouting, drawing the attention of everyone nearby to my table before the alarm was raised. If I were a conspirator, would I want that kind of scrutiny? Quote. A flicker of doubt crossed the captain's face. He glanced at Choi Sang. You pressed on, your mind racing, connecting the dots. And this sickle, you gestured to the tool in his hand. Every farmer has one. But the man who caused the diversion, Jiangnan the thatcher, is not a farmer. He works with straw, yes, but not in the fields. And he, as my cousin so loudly announced to half the temple, has a grudge against the royal court. A far more compelling motive for disruption than a few late bags of rice, wouldn't you agree? Quote, you were laying a trail away from yourself, towards Jiangnan. It felt wrong to throw him to the wolves. but you were fighting for your family's survival. Choi Sang scoffed. She's trying to blame the other troublemaker. They are in it together. Quote, Then find him, you challenged, your gaze sweeping the crowd. But you knew they wouldn't. Jeong-nun had melted away like a phantom. He was a perfect scapegoat, but an absent one. Her accomplice has fled, Choi Sang declared triumphantly. Or perhaps, you said, your voice dropping, drawing them in, the thief is someone no one would ever suspect. Someone who would not need a clumsy diversion because no one was watching them. Someone who could walk right up to the dais, express their admiration and palm a golden boar, while everyone else was distracted by the music and the spectacle. You looked pointedly towards the huddle of indignant nobles. Someone who would not use a farmer's sickle, but whose soft hands could easily conceal such a prize. Quote, A dangerous murmur went through the crowd. You had turned the accusation back on the powerful. It was a desperate, dangerous gamble. The guard captain looked from you to Choi Sang to the glowering nobles. He was caught. Accusing a teacher from a poor village was easy. Accusing a nobleman was career suicide. He chose the path of least resistance, which was still, unfortunately, you. Enough, the captain growled. His face was unreadable. Your guilt or innocence will be determined later. For now, you are a person of interest. You and your family's records. He nodded to his men. Take her to the storeroom. She will remain there under guard until the abbot returns and this matter is settled. Quote, Choi Sang smiled, a thin, cruel slash across his face. He had won, for now. 2 guards took your arms. They weren't rough, but their grip was inescapable. As they led you away from the stunned crowd, past the pyramids of grain your village had given up, you felt a strange calm settle over you. The fear was still there, a cold knot in your stomach, but it was joined by a fierce, burning resolve. They had taken your freedom, tarnished your name, and threatened your family. But they had made one critical mistake. They had locked a teacher in a quiet room with a puzzle to solve. And you knew, as the heavy storeroom door closed behind you, plunging you into the dusty darkness, that you would not rest until you had found the truth. You would unravel Choi Sang's lies, you would find the golden boar, and you would clear your name. The lesson had begun. The storeroom was a tomb of forgotten things. Dust motes danced like frantic spirits in the single thin shaft of moonlight that pierced the gloom from a high barred window. The air was thick with the scent of decaying paper, dried herbs, and the faint metallic tang of old bronze. It was a quiet, suffocating space, meant to break a spirit. But you were a teacher. You had spent countless hours in quiet rooms, and your spirit was not so easily broken. Panic was a luxury you couldn't afford. Methodical thought was the only tool you had left. First, you took stock of your prison. It was not a cell. Piled in the corners were scrolls of scripture deemed too damaged to be read, their wooden ends nibbled by insects. There were chipped pottery, headless statues of minor deities, and several large, empty bronze braziers. It was the temple's attic, a place for things no longer useful, but too sacred to be thrown away. You ran a hand along a dusty shelf, your fingers tracing the accumulated grime. This was a place of history, of stories that had ended. Your story, you vowed, was not over yet. Your eyes, now adjusted to the dim light, began a systematic search. You were not looking for a weapon or an escape route. The barred window and heavy door made that a fool's hope. You were looking for an anomaly, a detail that didn't fit. You started near the door, where the guards had shoved you in. The floor was stone but covered in a fine layer of dust, disturbed only by your own footprints and those of the guards. You knelt, your robes pooling around you, and examined the area with the same focus you'd used to grade a student's calligraphy. And there it was. Half hidden under the edge of a heavy storage chest, something glittered faintly in the moonlight. It wasn't gold. It was smaller, more delicate. You reached for it, your heart giving a hopeful little flutter. It was a piece of a hairpin. Not a simple wooden or bone pin like the village women wore, but an exquisitely crafted piece of silver filigree, shaped like a tiny ginkgo leaf. In the center of the leaf was a small, empty setting where a jewel had once been. It was broken, a fragment snapped off from a larger piece. A thing of quality and expense. A thing that had no business being in a dusty storeroom. You curled your fingers around it, The cool metal, a small, hard secret in your palm. It was a clue, but to what you didn't yet know. Hours crawled by. The distant sounds of the temple guards changing shifts were the only markers of time. Finally, the bolt on the door scraped open. A young monk, barely a man, entered carrying a wooden tray with a bowl of thin rice porridge and a cup of water. He had a round, open face and eyes that held more curiosity than judgment. He placed the tray on the floor and bowed, careful not to look at you directly. "The abbot has been summoned from the lower monastery," he said, his voice soft. "He will arrive at dawn to pass judgment." You looked at the meager meal, then at the boy. This was your chance. "Thank you, brother." "Yan," he supplied, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "Brother Yan," you said, your voice gentle, the same tone you used to soothe a nervous child. "It is a terrible thing that has happened. Such a beautiful offering. Did you see the golden boar before it was? Ziwu? Taken?" Quote. He nodded, his eyes lighting up. "Oh yes, I helped polish the pedestal this morning. The merchant's guildmaster was there, he never stopped talking about it. Solid gold from the northern mines, he kept saying, a symbol of the kingdom's unshakable strength." Single quote. Quote. The northern mines. The phrase snagged in your mind. "A fine gift," you said carefully. "The royal family must have been very pleased. Was the queen there to see it presented?" Quote. Brother Yan hesitated, glancing towards the door as if to make sure no one was listening. He leaned in a little closer. "She was. But it was strange, teacher." He called you teacher instinctively, a sign of respect that warmed you. Everyone else was smiling, but Her Majesty, she looked so sad. She touched the pedestal, but she wouldn't look at the boar itself. She just stared at the black jade eyes. Then she turned and left. One of her ladies-in-waiting followed her. She seemed very distressed. Sadness, not anger, not pride, sadness. It was another detail that didn't fit Choi Sang's narrative of a simple, greedy theft. "A heavy cloak," Joseon had said. "It's always the people with the barest shoulders who are forced to wear the heaviest one." You were beginning to understand he wasn't just talking about peasants. "Those northern mines," you prodded gently, taking a sip of water. "They have long been a source of the kingdom's wealth, I suppose?" Quote. Brother Yan's face clouded. He was young, but he had ears. In a temple filled with powerful men, whispers were a currency of their own. "They are a source of wealth now," he said in a low voice. "But the old monks, they remember. Before our king's father took the throne, those mines belonged to the house of Jin. The Jins, they did not yield them willingly. There was a war, a short, bloody one. The entire house was extinguished. The Merchants Guild bought the mining rights from the king's father for a pittance. Some say the gold itself is cursed with the blood of the Jins." A cold wave washed over you. The puzzle pieces were beginning to slam into place with terrifying clarity. The golden boar was not a gift. It was a monument to a massacre, a symbol of strength built on a foundation of blood and conquest. No wonder the queen, a mother with a newborn son, looked upon it with sorrow. To celebrate her child's life with a symbol of so much death, it would be unbearable. "The lady-in-waiting who followed the queen," you asked, your voice barely a whisper. "Did you notice anything about her?" Quote. Brother Yeon thought for a moment. "She was the queen's most trusted attendant, Lady Seo, always by her side. She wears her hair in the high court style, with many silver pins. Ginkgo leaves, I think. A symbol of her family." You opened your hand. In the center of your palm, the broken silver ginkgo leaf seemed to burn with a cold light. It wasn't just a hairpin, it was a connection. Lady Seo, distressed, following her sorrowful queen from the dais. "The broken pin dropped in haste near this storeroom door. The theft was a lie. There was no farmer accomplice, no greedy peasant. This was an act born not of greed, but of conscience. The queen, or someone acting on her desperate, unspoken wish, had removed the boar. They hadn't stolen it to sell it. They had hidden it to erase its profane presence from a sacred celebration. And where would you hide something heavy, something you wanted to disappear, in a sprawling temple complex? You would not bury it in the raked gravel. You would not try to smuggle it past the guards. You would hide it in a place full of other forgotten, discarded things. A place no one would think to look. A place like this storeroom. Your gaze darted around the room, no longer seeing just dust and decay, but possibilities. Wouldn't be out in the open. It had to be concealed. Your eyes fell on the pile of large, empty bronze braziers in the corner. They were heavy, ornate, and caked with the ash and soot of 100 festivals past. Perfect for hiding something within. You stood up, your bowl of porridge forgotten. "Brother Yeon," you said, your voice firm and clear, "I need you to do something for me. You must not tell anyone what I have asked. Can you do that?" Quote. He looked frightened, but he nodded, his young eyes wide. "Go to the head of the temple guard. Tell him that the teacher, Minju, has solved the crime. Tell him the golden boar was never stolen. Tell him it is in the last place anyone would think to look." You paused, then added, "And tell my cousin Choi Sang that the lesson is about to be concluded." Quote. As Brother Yeon scurried out, his face a mixture of fear and awe, you walked to the largest of the bronze braziers. It stood as tall as your waist. Reaching inside, your hands plunged into a thick layer of cold, soft ash. Your fingers brushed against something hard, smooth, and unmistakable. It was heavier than stone, colder than iron. You felt the curve of a tusk, the solid, unyielding weight of it. You did not pull it out. You simply left your hand resting on its surface. The cage had become a classroom, the accusation a puzzle, and the stolen boar a terrible truth. You had found it. But revealing it meant exposing a secret that could shake the throne itself. Choi Sang had accused you of conspiring against the royal family. The irony was a bitter taste in your mouth. He was wrong about the crime, but he might have been right about the consequence. Clearing your name had just become the most dangerous thing you could possibly do. The abbot would arrive at dawn, and you would have to choose which story to tell. The weight was a physical thing, a heavy blanket woven from dust and silence. Your hand, still inside the cold brazier, rested on the undeniable truth of the golden boar. It was a discovery that should have felt like a victory, but instead it felt like a key to a much larger cage. You had proven your innocence of the theft, but in doing so you had stumbled upon a secret of the queen. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each one a slow, agonizing drop of water. You rehearsed your speech for the abbot, a careful, delicate dance of words designed to expose Choi Sang's lie without implicating the desperate sorrow of the queen. Then, a sound. Not the heavy, confident tramp of guards, but a soft, scraping noise at the door. A metallic click. The bolt wasn't being drawn back. It was being coaxed. Your breath caught in your throat. The heavy wooden door swung inward with a whisper-soft groan, not thrown open in authority, but eased ajar with a thief's stealth. A figure slipped through the gap and closed the door behind him, plunging the room back into near-total darkness. You didn't need the light to know who it was. The faint scent of dried straw and something acrid like old smoke clung to him. "Jung Nun," you said, your voice a flat, steady line. You pulled your hand from the brazier, leaving the boar in its bed of ash. He let out a low chuckle, a sound stripped of its earlier nervous energy. It was sharper now, colder. "The teacher is quick. I knew you were. I saw it in the way you held your brush. Precise, careful, not like the others." He moved away from the door, a shadow detaching itself from other shadows. He was no longer the hunched, anxious man from the courtyard. He stood taller, his shoulders back, the shyness stripped away like a useless husk. In its place was a coiled stillness, the dangerous calm of a predator that knows it has cornered its prey. "What do you want?" you asked, taking a half-step back, your hand brushing against the rough stone of the wall. "I came to see if you'd figured it out," he said, his voice a low murmur that filled the small space. "And it seems you have. At least, part of it." He gestured with his chin towards the brazier. "You found the queen's little indiscretion. Very good. A mother's heart is a powerful thing. She couldn't stand the sight of it, you know. That glittering pig. A monument to the butcher who put her husband's family on the throne. She had her lady-in-waiting hide it away, to be lost forever." His words confirmed your theory, but his tone was mocking. He wasn't an accomplice. He was a spectator, enjoying the secret palace drama. "And you let me take the blame for it," you stated, the accusation sharp. "Blame?" He laughed again, a harsh, grating sound. "Teacher, you have such small worries." "Blame, a spoiled ledger. These are gnats buzzing around a tiger's ear. I didn't care who they blamed for the missing toy. Your cousin, in his infinite wisdom, chose you. It made things interesting. Quote, my family's honor is not a source of entertainment. Honor, he spat the word, and the last of his humorous facade dissolved into pure contempt. Let me tell you about honor. They gave my mother a scroll praising my father's honorable sacrifice. A beautiful scroll, fine paper, elegant characters. He didn't fall from that roof, teacher. He was pushed. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the weight of his revelation. He was a good Thatcher, Jeongnan continued, his voice dropping to a raw, ragged whisper of memory. The best. He could hear the secrets of a house through its rafters. While working on the palace roof, he heard two men talking. A minister and a guild master. They were laughing about the Jin War, about how much they'd paid for the northern mines after the unfortunate slaughter. They talked about how the new king's father had personally signed the order to execute not just the Jin soldiers, but their wives and children. To prune the family tree at its root, was the phrase they used. My father heard them, and they saw him hear them. He took a step closer, and in the thin moonlight you could see the bitter grief carved into the lines of his face. They didn't give him a trial. They didn't accuse him of treason. They just waited until he was at the highest point of the roof, and one of the royal guards lost his footing and bumped into him. An accident. He was given a scroll, and they were given a mine of gold. That is the honor of kings and merchants. Quote, the story settled in your bones, a chilling, undeniable truth. His crusade wasn't about a single injustice. It was about a generational wound that had never stopped bleeding. The water on the ledger, you began, trying to fit the pieces together, was a distraction. A test, he cut in. I wanted to see if you had a spine, if you would just cry and accept your fate, or if you would fight. I needed the guards' attention focused here, on this foolish little drama of a missing statue and a clumsy scribe. I needed everyone looking in the wrong direction. A terrible realization began to dawn. The wrong direction from what? Quote? He smiled then, a slow, grim twisting of his lips. It was the most terrifying expression you had ever seen. From the real offering, the one I am preparing. He walked over to the high, barred window and effortlessly hoisted himself up to sit on the ledge, his silhouette framed against the moonlit sky. His agility was startling. He was as comfortable here as a bird on a branch. This whole celebration is a lie, he said, his voice resonating with a prophet's fury. The people are forced to give their grain, the very food from their children's mouths, to celebrate a child who will one day grow up to be their master. They bring their harvest to the temple as a gift, and the nobles and monks praise their piety while planning how to spend the profits. It's a grand performance. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. And every performance needs a grand finale. Quote, what have you done? You whispered, the cold dread finally coalescing into a specific horrifying shape. As a Thatcher, he said, tapping a finger against the stone wall, I know what a building fears most. Fire. And this temple, for all its stone, is surrounded by it. Wooden storehouses, monks' quarters with thatched roofs, and, of course, the granaries. He paused, letting the word hang in the air. Those beautiful pyramids of rice and barley. A whole district's livelihood, piled up like kindling, so dry, so flammable, all it needs is a spark. Your blood ran cold. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't a vandal. He was an arsonist. You're going to burn the grain. You breathed, the horror of it stealing the air from your lungs. Burn it? His laugh was a dry rustle, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. Oh no, that's not grand enough. Burning the grain is just the beginning. The granaries are built against the western wall of the main courtyard. Next to them are the stables, full of dry hay. Next to the stables is the pavilion where the musicians are sleeping. The wind is coming from the west tonight. It will be a chain reaction, a glorious, roaring fire that will turn this entire opulent farce into ash and smoke. A pyre for the new prince, lit with the gifts of his people. A fitting tribute, don't you think? An offering of truth. This was the full scale of his plan, not just destruction, but a massacre. The sleeping musicians, the monks, the guards, they would all be caught in the inferno. He was going to burn the temple to the ground. You're insane, you gasped. pressing yourself back against the wall. You'll kill dozens of innocent people, quote. Innocent? He scoffed, his face contorting with rage. Were the Jin children innocent? Was my father innocent? There are no innocents in a rotten kingdom, teacher. There are only the powerful and their victims. I am just giving the victims a voice. A voice of fire. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a small clay pot sealed with wax and a bundle of oil-soaked rags. I've spent the last hour rigging the granary roofs. A little oil, a few strategically placed bundles of tinder. All it needs is one flame. He was going to do it, right now, while everyone was distracted by you and the missing boar. You looked at the door, then back at him. He was mad with grief and vengeance, a man who had decided to burn down the world because his own had been destroyed. Just then, you heard it. The heavy, rhythmic marching of guards. The sharp, angry voice of your cousin. Open this door. By order of the guard captain. Open it now. Quote. They were here. Salvation and condemnation all at once. Jung Nan heard it too. A flicker of something, not fear, but urgency, crossed his face. He slid gracefully from the window ledge to the floor. It seems the performance is about to begin, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He looked at you, his eyes boring into yours, pinning you to the wall. You have a choice to make, teacher. A real one this time. You can scream. You can tell them everything. You can point them to the granaries and save their precious temple. And in return they will thank you. And then they will hang you for knowing the Queen's secret. Or, at the very least, lock you away forever to ensure your silence. You will be a hero for a moment, and a ghost for the rest of your life. Quote. He took a step towards the dark corner of the room. Or, you say nothing. You let them find their ridiculous golden pig. You let them argue and posture and accuse each other. And you give me 10 minutes. 10 minutes is all I need. My revenge will be complete. Their temple will burn. And in the chaos, you and your little secret will be forgotten. You can just walk away. Go back to your students. What is one corrupt temple compared to the life of your family? Quote, the bolt on the door screeched as a heavy bar was used to pry it open from the outside. Jungnan gave you one last, haunting look. The world is on fire, teacher. You just have to decide if you want to be the one holding the bucket or the one who warms her hands. Quote, and then, with the lithe silence of a cat, he scaled the wall and slipped through the high barred window, disappearing into the night just as the storeroom door crashed open, flooding the room with the light of a dozen torches. Choi Sang stood there, his face a mask of triumph, flanked by the guard captain and his men. There she is, your cousin bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at you. The conspirator! Quote, you stood alone in the sudden, blinding glare, your heart a frantic trapped bird in your chest. At your feet, hidden in a pile of ash, lay a queen's secret. In your mind, the image of a raging inferno bloomed, threatening to consume everything. And in the ringing silence, you heard Jeongnan's final question echo, a terrible, burning choice. The light blinded you, the sudden noise of physical blow. For a heartbeat, you were just a girl in a storeroom, trapped. Choi Sang's face, contorted with petty triumph, was the face of your doom. Behind him, the guard captain's expression was stone, the guards' torches casting long, dancing shadows that turned the room into a cage of light and dark. Jeongnan's final venomous choice echoed in the roaring silence of your mind. Hold the bucket or warm your hands. Then, from the courtyard, a new sound cut through the tension. A single high-pitched scream, followed by another. Fire! The granaries! Fire! Smoke, acrid and biting, began to snake under the storeroom door, a ghostly harbinger of the chaos to come. The guards shifted uneasily. The captain's head whipped around. Choi Sang's triumphant expression faltered, replaced by confusion. This was his moment, and the world had dared to interrupt it. You chose the bucket. With a gut-wrenching sob, you collapsed to your knees, the motion so sudden and seemingly genuine that even Choi Sang took a step back. He made me, you cried, pitching your voice to carry the perfect note of terror and hysteria. You pointed a trembling finger at the high barred window. Jungnan? It was all him. Quote, the guard captain took a step forward, his eyes narrowed, his attention now fully on you. "What are you talking about, girl?" "The fire? It's a diversion," you wailed, forcing tears to well in your eyes. You were a teacher. You knew how to command a room, even if it was through a performance of utter collapse. You crawled on your hands and knees to the large bronze brazier. He said no one would miss the grain if they thought the kingdom's history was at stake. Quote, "You plunged both hands into the ash, your fingers closing around the cold, heavy form of the golden boar. With a theatrical grunt of effort, you heaved it out and pushed it across the dusty floor towards the captain. It skidded to a halt at his feet, the gold gleaming dully in the torchlight, its jade eyes seeming to mock them all. A collective gasp went through the guards. Choi Sang stared at it, his mouth agape. You had just proven your story, or at least the most important part of it. "He hid it here," you sobbed, pointing again at the window. "He said the fire would draw everyone to the west side of the temple, to the granaries. But his real target, his real revenge, is the Hall of Scriptures. He's going to burn it all. The royal lineages, the histories, the sacred texts. He said he would erase the king from memory." Quote, "It was a lie born of desperate genius. An arsonist was a common criminal. A man who sought to destroy a nation's very identity was a monster. This was a threat the abbot and the nobles would understand on a visceral level. Far more than a pile of burning rice." Choi Sang, seeing his moment of glory being upstaged by a real crisis, immediately seized upon your narrative. "The Hall of Scriptures, of course. The man is not just a vandal, he's a nihilist." He turned to the guard captain, his chest puffed out. "We must not fall for his trick. Captain, you must send men to protect the library at once. I will lead a contingent to the eastern bell tower. It gives the clearest view of the library. That's where he'll be, the coward, watching his work. I will capture him myself." Quote, he had swallowed the bait completely. The guard captain, his mind reeling from the reappearance of the boar and the new, greater threat, made a swift decision. "Half of you, to the granaries! Try to contain the blaze, the rest of you, with me. We secure the library. Choi Sang, take 2 men and secure that bell tower. If you see him, do not engage. Just report back." Quote, as the guards began to mobilize, their organized response dissolving into frantic, shouted orders, a new figure stumbled through the doorway, his young face pale with terror and smudged with soot. It was the monk, Yan. "The Orchid Pavilion!" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "The wind is carrying the embers. The roof, it's a thatched roof. The royal heir is in the Orchid Pavilion." Quote, the world stopped. The fire was no longer about grain or books. It was about to consume the single most important person in the kingdom. The guard captain's face went white. The Orchid Pavilion was on the far side of the temple grounds, a secluded, beautiful structure built for quiet contemplation, now terrifyingly isolated. Its delicate wooden frame and straw roof, designed for beauty, made it a perfect pyre. In the explosion of renewed panic, as the captain bellowed for water brigades and Choi Sang stood frozen, realizing the scale of the disaster was dwarfing his ambition, no one was looking at you. You were a solved problem, a detail in a story that had just been horrifically rewritten. You slipped back into the shadows of the storeroom. Zhang Nan's words came back to you. "What is one corrupt temple compared to the life of your family?" Asterisk. But now it wasn't a temple, it was a baby. Your mind, the methodical, pattern-seeking mind of a teacher, scanned a mental map of the temple grounds, built from Brother Yan's descriptions and your own observations. The main path to the Orchid Pavilion would be a bottleneck of terror, a stampede of panicked monks and nobles. The route past the granaries was a wall of flame. But Yan had said the abbot was coming from the lower monastery. There had to be a service path. A path that ran behind the main structures, behind the kitchens, where they would keep the water. With your heart hammering a frantic rhythm against your ribs, you crept out the back of the storeroom, opposite the main door. Smoke billowed from the west, a thick, choking curtain that turned the serene temple courtyard into a vision of hell. The air was filled with the crackle of burning wood, and the roar of a fire that sounded like an enraged beast. Ignoring the shouts and the chaos, you turned east, into the thickening smoke, and ran. You found the path exactly where you reasoned it would be, a narrow, gravel track that ran behind the large kitchen building. Here, the noise of the main courtyard was slightly muffled, replaced by the immediate, urgent clang of pots and pans as the kitchen staff organized a desperate, impromptu water brigade. You saw a row of large water barrels used for washing rice and vegetables. Without a second's hesitation, you grabbed 2 empty buckets. They were heavy, clumsy, but they were your only weapons. Then you saw it, a tool that made your heart leap with a desperate hope. Propped against the kitchen wall was a long bamboo pole with a metal hook on the end, used for retrieving items from high shelves or hanging cured meats. It was long, sturdy, perfect. Hoisting the pole onto your shoulder and grabbing the 2 buckets, you plunged deeper into the smoke, your lungs burning, your eyes streaming. The smoke was a disorienting, suffocating fog. You navigated by memory and instinct, keeping the stone wall of the kitchen building on your right. The path was deserted. Everyone was either fighting the fire or fleeing from it. You felt terrifyingly alone. You rounded the corner of the last outbuilding and finally saw it. The Orchid Pavilion stood on a small, manicured lawn, an island of desperate tranquility surrounded by a sea of encroaching chaos. It was not yet on fire, but the danger was terrifyingly clear. The wind, hot and carrying a blizzard of glowing red embers, was gusting directly towards it. You could see the sparks, like malignant fireflies, landing on the thick, dry thatch of the ornate roof. A few small tendrils of smoke were already beginning to rise where the embers had landed. From inside, you could hear the panicked cries of the attendants, and, fainter, the wail of a terrified infant. They had barred the doors from the inside, a fatal mistake, trapping themselves in the path of the inferno. You dropped the buckets beside a large, decorative stone cistern filled with water for the pavilion's small garden. There was no time to shuttle water back and forth. You had to get onto the roof. You had to stop the embers from catching. Looking at the elegant, curved roof of the pavilion, you saw your chance. The eaves were low, barely higher than your head, designed to create an intimate, sheltered feeling. Using the long bamboo pole, you hooked the curved metal end over the edge of the roof beam. You pulled, testing its strength. It held. Taking a deep, ragged breath that was more smoke than air, you began to climb. The pole was awkward, your silk robes tangling around your legs. Your hands, accustomed to the delicate weight of a brush, strained against the rough bamboo. You were a teacher, a woman of ink and paper, not a roofer like Jongnan. But the image of his face, twisted with a grief that had curdled into madness, fueled you. The sound of the baby crying from inside the pavilion drove you. You scrambled upwards, your sandals slipping on the pole. Your muscles screamed. Finally, your fingers scraped against the rough tiles of the roof's edge. You clawed your way up, pulling yourself onto the steeply sloped surface. You lay there for a moment, panting, the heat from the approaching fire washing over you in waves. Below you, the courtyard was a maelstrom. To your right, the granaries were a roaring pillar of flame. And here, on this roof, hundreds of tiny, glowing embers were landing, each one a seed of destruction. You grabbed a fistful of your own robes, dunked the fabric into the cistern from your precarious perch, and began to beat at the smoldering spots on the thatch. It was a desperate, hopeless feeling task. For every one you extinguished, 3 more seemed to land. Your frantic movements were a tiny, absurd dance against a hurricane of fire. You were one small woman, armed with a wet rag and a stubborn refusal to let the world burn. The bucket was heavy, the fire was immense, but you held on, swinging your arm again and again as the inferno roared closer. Your desperate act on the roof was not in vain. Below, a team of guards and monks, galvanized by the threat to the royal heir, had formed a chain, passing buckets of water from the cistern up to the pavilion. Their actions were frantic but organized, a small pocket of order in the spreading chaos. 2 agile guards, seeing your solitary struggle, scrambled up the bamboo pole you had left propped against the wall. They took over your post, their movements efficient and practiced, beating back the embers with a grim determination that told you the pavilion, and the child within, would be safe. You slid down the pole, your hands raw and burning, your body aching. But there was no time for relief. Your lie had bought you moments, had pointed the authorities toward the Hall of Scriptures, a building of stone and tile that could resist the flames far longer than wood and thatch. It was Choi Sang's idiotic, self-aggrandizing claim that gave you the real clue. The bell tower, the highest point in the temple complex, the perfect vantage point for a man who wanted to watch the world burn. That's where he would be. You had to get there before he realized his grand finale was being thwarted, before his grief found a new, more desperate target. The chase was on, though only you knew you were in one. You plunged back into the maelstrom of the main courtyard. It was a hellish landscape now. A heavy wooden beam, its edges glowing like a demonic grin, crashed down from the roof of a burning dormitory just steps in front of you, showering you with a cascade of sparks that seared tiny holes in your silk robes. The air was a thick, searing soup of smoke that tore at your throat. Panicked nobles and servants ran blindly, their screams adding to the symphony of destruction. You were a salmon fighting your way upstream against a current of human terror. You kept the bell tower in your sights, a dark finger pointing accusingly at a sky choked with orange and black. The most direct path was blocked by a wall of flame where the granaries had once stood. You had to go around, through the Scholar's Walk, a network of ornamental gardens and covered walkways designed for quiet contemplation. Now it was a labyrinth of fire. The delicate wooden bridges that crossed over serene koi ponds were collapsing, one by one, into the boiling water. The fish cooked in their own tranquil home. A covered walkway, its roof ablaze, showered you with falling, flaming tiles that shattered on the flagstones around you like malevolent pottery. You shielded your head with your arms and ran, your lungs on fire, your vision blurring from the smoke and tears. The path ahead was blocked by a collapsed bridge, the gap, a chasm of steam and ash. For a moment, despair seized you. You were trapped. Then you saw it. A heavy stone statue of a revered scholar, toppled by the concussion of a falling beam, lay on its side. Its long, sturdy form, now lying prone, spanned the gap. It was a desecration, but it was also a bridge. Without hesitation, you scrambled onto the statue, its cold, carved robes slick with soot. You ran across its back, your sandals finding purchase in the crook of its stone elbow, and leaped to the other side, landing hard on the gravel path. The bell tower loomed directly ahead, a column of stone wrapped in a creeping shroud of fire. The lower levels, built of wood, were already engulfed. Flames licked up the stone walls like greedy tongues. The main staircase was gone, a charred, skeletal ruin. Jung-nan was trapped up there, or so he would want anyone to think. You scanned the outer wall, your teacher's mind desperately seeking a pattern, a solution. And you saw it. The masons had left a lattice of scaffolding on the eastern face, where they had been making repairs. It was rickety, scorched, and terrifyingly high. But it was a way up. As you began to climb, the heat from the stone wall was so intense it felt like it was cooking you in your own clothes. The wooden planks of the scaffolding groaned under your weight, some of them blackened and brittle. Splinters drove into your palms. Below, the world was a blur of fire and screaming. But you kept climbing, your mind focused on the single, terrible purpose that had been thrust upon you. You were no longer shy Minju, the quiet teacher. You were a force of nature in your own right, a countercurrent to Jung-nan's fiery tide. You hauled yourself over the final ledge and onto the top floor of the bell tower. It was an open-air platform, the massive bronze bell hanging in its center, silent and imposing. And he was there. Jung-nan stood at the far railing, his back to you, looking out over his creation. He was not panicked. He was not triumphant. He was still, like a man observing a painting. The firelight cast his silhouette in flickering bronze, turning him into a living statue of vengeance. The wind whipped at his hair and clothes, carrying the roar of the fire up to this high, lonely perch. "You're too late," he said, without turning around. His voice was eerily calm. "It's beautiful, isn't it? The sound, the light. It's the only honest thing this place has produced all night." Quote, "You took a ragged breath, the clean, cool air at this height, a shocking relief. You failed, Jung-nan." That made him turn. His face was smudged with soot, his eyes wide and fever-bright with a terrifying ecstasy. "Failed? Teacher, look." He swept an arm across the panorama of destruction. "They are running. They are screaming. The nobles are as helpless as the servants. The grain that they stole from starving families is turning to ash. This is not failure. This is truth." "The royal heir is safe," you said, your voice steady and clear over the wind's howl. "The orchid pavilion is secure. Your fire is being fought. All you have done is destroy the homes of the monks and the food of the people you claim to champion." Quote, a flicker of disbelief crossed his face, a crack in his messianic certainty. "You're lying." Quote, "Am I?" you challenged, taking a step closer. Look past the flames. See the water brigades? See the guards protecting the pavilion? You lit a fire, but you didn't understand the people. They don't just run. They fight back. They protect each other. Something you've forgotten how to do." Quote, he followed your gaze, his eyes narrowing, trying to pierce the smoke. He could see the organized efforts now, the small pockets of resistance that were containing his chaos. The truth of your words began to dawn on his face, and the manic certainty began to crumble, replaced by a raw, naked fury. "Then I'll finish it!" he roared, a guttural cry of pure anguish. He turned and lunged not at you, but at the massive bell. He grabbed the thick wooden striking beam that hung beside it. "If I can't burn their future, I'll shatter their past. I will silence this bell forever." He swung the heavy beam, aiming it at the ancient bronze. It was a mad act of symbolic destruction. Before you could think, you moved. You threw yourself at him, not with the intention of fighting, but of interfering. You grabbed his arm, your meager weight barely enough to alter the trajectory of the swing. The heavy beam missed the bell, striking the massive supporting pillar with a sickening crack of splintering wood. The entire platform shuddered. A long, groaning tear appeared in the floor. The pillar he had struck, weakened by the fire from below and the blow from above, began to give way. Jongnan staggered back, his rage momentarily forgotten in the face of their immediate peril. He looked at you, his eyes wide with a dawning horror that had nothing to do with his failed plan. "The whole tower is coming down." He was right. The floor tilted violently. You lost your footing and slid towards the crumbling edge. Jiangnan, reaching out with a reflex born of something other than hatred, grabbed your arm, his hand clamping down like an iron vice. For a moment you were tethered together, two enemies bound by the imminent destruction they had wrought. He held you there, his face inches from yours. The firelight illuminated the profound, bottomless grief in his eyes. The rage was gone, burned out, leaving only an empty, desolate sorrow. "My father, he was a good man," he whispered, his voice cracking. He deserved more than a scroll. In that moment you didn't see a monster. You saw the little boy who had lost his father and had been lost ever since. "I know," you said, your own voice thick with an empathy that surprised you both. The tower gave another violent lurch. The section of floor Jongnan was standing on began to break away. He looked at you, then at the abyss below, then back at you. A decision formed in his eyes. It was not one of rage, or of surrender, but of finality. "They shouldn't have pushed him," he said, his voice strangely peaceful. "And then he let you go, not by dropping you, but by shoving you with all his might back towards the center of the platform, away from the collapsing edge. You tumbled across the tilting floor, landing in a heap against the base of the great bell. Jongnan, on his crumbling precipice of wood and stone, gave you a last fleeting look. It was a look of profound and terrible release. Then, with the grace of a roofer who knows the moment a structure will fail, he leaned back and allowed the collapsing floor to carry him down into the heart of the inferno. He didn't scream. He simply disappeared into the roar and the light, a final offering to his own all-consuming fire. You lay there, stunned, your heart hammering against your ribs. The great bell above you let out a deep, mournful groan as its supports buckled. The tower was tearing itself apart. You scrambled towards the scaffolding, your only way down. Just as your hands closed around the hot, rickety wood, the entire top floor gave way. The massive bronze bell plunged downwards, crashing through the burning floors below with a series of deafening, discordant tolls, a funeral dirge for the man who had tried to silence it. The shockwave of its fall threw you from the tower. For a moment you were flying. Then the world became a confusing, violent explosion of pain as you hit something. A lower roof, a pile of debris, and then there was only darkness. You woke to the scent of burnt pine and something else, something clean and herbal, like crushed mint. The world returned not as a violent crash, but as a soft, gradual dawning. A gentle coolness rested on your forehead, and the throbbing pain in your head had subsided to a dull, distant ache. You were lying on a soft pallet in a small, clean room. Sunlight filtered through a paper screen, painted the wooden floor in pale gold stripes. Your arm was tightly bound in clean linen. and a dull ache resonated from your ribs with every breath. A young face swam into view. It was Brother Yeon, the novice monk, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and relief. He was dabbing your forehead with a damp cloth. "Teacher Minju," he whispered, his voice catching. "You are awake." The physician said, "They said the gods must have softened your fall." Quote, "You tried to sit up, a sharp pain in your side making you gasp. Yeon gently pushed you back down. Please, rest. You have been unconscious for a day and a night. You saved us. You saved everyone." Quote. The memories rushed back, a chaotic flood of fire, smoke, and Jiangnan's face as he fell. "Jiangnan? You managed?" Your voice a dry rasp. Yeon's expression sobered. He looked down at his hands. They found what was left of the bell tower. And him. The abbot has ordered prayers for the repose of his tormented soul. What he did was a great sin, but the abbot said that great sins are often born from great suffering. He looked back at you, a profound sadness in his young eyes. "You were right, teacher. He was not just a criminal." You closed your eyes, a single tear tracing a clean path through the soot that still stained your cheek. You had won, but it felt like a hollow, aching victory. "And the fire?" you asked. "It is out," Yeon said, a note of wonder in his voice. "It was a terrible night. The granaries are lost. Several dormitories are gone. But the people, we saved the Orchid Pavilion. The royal heir is safe. And the Hall of Scriptures, thanks to your warning, was untouched." He smiled, a genuine, bright smile that seemed to push back the gloom. "The king himself has sent a commendation. He calls you the scholar heroine of Bongyun Temple." Scholar heroine. The title felt alien, a silk robe on a simple scarecrow. You had acted not out of heroism, but out of a desperate instinctual need to stop a tragedy from consuming another. Yeon helped you drink some water, the coolness soothing your raw throat. From outside, a sound began to filter into the quiet room. It was music. Not the panicked clamor of the festival's interruption, but a soft, gentle melody played on flutes and a gyeogyum. It was followed by a murmur of happy voices, punctuated by laughter. "They have resumed the celebration," Yeon explained, noticing your questioning look. "The abbot said it was important. He said we should not let darkness have the final word. It is a celebration not just for the prince's birth now, but for our survival, for our coming together." Quote, he helped you to the window and slid the paper screen open. The view was breathtaking. The main courtyard, though scarred at its western edge with the blackened skeletons of buildings, was once again full of life. The damaged areas had been cordoned off, but the rest of the space was vibrant. The morning sun glinted off the brilliant silk robes of the nobles and the simpler cotton of the commoners, who were no longer segregated but mingling freely. The air, though still carrying a faint smoky tang, was also filled with the smell of rice cakes being steamed and sweet tea being brewed. The temple was giving back what had been lost, feeding the very people who had brought their grain. The golden boar was back on its pedestal, gleaming under the sun. It seemed smaller now, less imposing. You saw the queen, standing at a distance with her retinue, her face no longer filled with sorrow, but with a quiet, contemplative peace. She looked towards the Orchid Pavilion. Then her gaze swept across the crowd, a gentle smile gracing her lips before she turned and departed. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared secret, that only you and she would ever truly understand. The joy in the courtyard was different from before. It wasn't the formal, performative joy of a state-mandated event. It was the deep, resonant joy of relief. Farmers clapped guards on the back. Monks shared their food with merchants. They had faced a common enemy, the fire, and in doing so had found a common humanity. The rigid lines of caste and duty had been blurred, washed away by water and trial by fire. This, you thought, was the real celebration. A commotion at the door to your room drew your attention. Your mother and father stood there, their faces etched with worry, their traveling clothes dusty. Your mother let out a small cry and rushed to your side, her hands fluttering over you, afraid to touch your bandages. Your father followed, his face a mask of gruff concern, but his eyes shining with unshed tears. They had heard you'd been accused, then that you'd been injured. Their journey must have been an agony of uncertainty. "Minju, my daughter," your mother wept, clutching your good hand. "We came as soon as we heard. your father said, his voice thick. We knew you could never do such a thing. You clung to them, the simple, solid reality of their presence, a balm to your bruised body and soul. This was your world, the one you had fought for. Not the world of kings and secrets, but this small, fierce circle of love. It was into this intimate scene that another figure appeared, hesitating in the doorway. It was Choi Sang. He looked smaller, diminished. His official's hat was gone, and his robes, though still of fine quality, were rumpled and stained with soot. The arrogant fire in his eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a deep, weary shame. He looked not at you, but at your parents, who instinctively drew closer to you, forming a protective barrier. He took a shuffling step into the room, and then, to everyone's astonishment, he fell to his knees. He pressed his forehead to the wooden floor in a kowtow of profound apology, his body trembling. "Uncle, Aunt," he said, his voice muffled by the floorboards. I have no words to express the depth of my shame. I have wronged you. I have wronged your daughter." Your father, a man of simple honor, was speechless. Your mother's grip on your hand tightened. Choi Sang lifted his head, but he still couldn't meet their eyes. He stared at a crack in the floor as he spoke, the words spilling out of him in a raw, broken torrent. "My ambition was a poison. I saw this position, this duty, as a way to climb, a way to escape the life of a farmer. I became hard. I thought shouting was a sign of strength, and cruelty a mark of authority. I saw people not as people, but as obstacles on my path." He finally risked a glance at you, his eyes filled with a miserable self-awareness. "And you, Minju, I was jealous of you. Not of your position. What is a village teacher? But of your quiet. Your learning. Things I never had. I saw your gentleness as a weakness, a flaw I could exploit to make myself look better. When the crisis came, I didn't see the truth. I only saw an opportunity to sacrifice you, my own blood for my own advancement. I wove a lie from your kindness and nearly saw you condemned for it." He bowed his head again, his shoulders shaking. "And you, while I was preening on a bell tower, ready to take credit for a capture that was part of your own brave deception, you were saving the prince. You were doing the real work. You were being what I pretended to be, a person of duty." Quote, Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Your father looked at you, his expression asking what should be done. You remembered Jiang Nan's face, the grief that had hollowed him out. You remembered the queen's sorrow. You remembered your cousin's pathetic, puffed-up posture, in the face of his own inadequacy. They were all trapped, in their own way. You gently freed your hand from your mother's and pushed yourself into a sitting position, ignoring the sharp protest from your ribs. "Cousin Sang," you said, your voice quiet but clear. "Please, get up." He looked up at you, surprised. "You are right," you continued, your gaze steady. "What you did was wrong. It was born of fear and a hunger to be seen as important. But I understand." He blinked, confusion warring with his shame. "Duty is a heavy cloak," you said, the words tasting familiar and true on your tongue. "You were forced to wear one that didn't fit you. You were a tax collector sent to take from your own people. It made you hard because you were afraid of being soft, afraid that their hardship would become your own." Quote, You saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. You had not just forgiven him. You had seen him. "You have learned a lesson," you said. "A hard one. I believe you will not forget it. My family, we will not forget it either. But we do not need to carry it as a weapon against you." You looked at your father. "He is still our family, father." Your father, a man who understood the cycles of drought and harvest, of hardship and recovery, seemed to comprehend. He let out a long, slow breath and nodded. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Choi Sang's shoulder. "Get up, son," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "The rice that is burned cannot be uneaten. We must now tend to the fields that remain." Choi Sang looked up, tears streaming freely down his face now, tears not of shame, but of relief. He allowed your father to help him to his feet. He stood before you, no longer a blustering official, but a humbled man. "I am resigning my post," he said quietly. "I will go back to the fields. It is where I belong." He looked at you, a newfound respect in his gaze. "You are the strong one in this family, Minju. Not me. I hope one day you can truly forgive me." "There is nothing left to forgive, cousin," you said, and you meant it. There is only what comes next. He bowed deeply one last time, to you and to your parents, and then he backed out of the room, leaving behind not a lingering bitterness, but the clean, open space of a debt that had been truly paid. You leaned back against your pillows, a deep weariness settling over you, but it was a peaceful weariness. The conflict was over. Not just the fire, not just the lie, but the small, petty war within your own family. The path back to your village would be different now. The journey home had already begun. The silence that followed his departure was deep and restorative. It was the quiet of a fever that is finally broken. Your mother smoothed your hair back from your forehead, her touch infinitely gentle. Your father moved to the open window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the bustling courtyard, a silent guardian watching over his newly reclaimed peace. The weight that had settled in your chest when your family name was first read from that decree, the weight that had grown heavier with every step on the cherry blossom trail, had finally, miraculously, lifted. You lay back, your body a map of aches and bruises, but your mind felt startlingly clear, like a sky washed clean after a storm. You thought of the grand celebration, of the journey that had brought you here. It felt like a lifetime ago. You had walked onto that trail as Minju, the shy teacher, your world contained within the four walls of your schoolhouse, your humor a private, silent thing. You had seen life as a series of characters to be taught, of quiet days to be lived. You now saw it as a complex, sprawling text, full of smudges, erasures, and hidden meanings. The faces of the past 2 days floated through your thoughts. The queen, her face a mask of serene sorrow, trapped by a legacy she did not choose. Her silent rebellion, hiding the golden boar, was an act of profound, desperate humanity. She was a queen, yes, but she was also a mother who refused to bless her son's life with a symbol of death. Her station did not protect her from suffering, it simply gilded her cage. And Jiangnan, his face contorted first by a shy humor that mirrored your own, then by a grief so absolute it had curdled into a nihilistic rage. He was not a simple villain. He was a story of injustice, a living testament to the fact that the powerful write the histories, and their ink can cover up a multitude of sins. His father, pushed from a roof, was rewritten as an honorable sacrifice. Jiangnan had spent his entire life trying to write a correction in the margins of that official story, and, in the end, had chosen fire as his ink. He had tried to burn down a corrupt system, but his fire was too wild, too full of hate. It consumed him before it could purify anything. You understood, with a painful clarity, that his shyness was not a personality trait, but a wall built around a wound the world had inflicted and then ignored. Then there was Choi Sang. His was a smaller, more common tragedy, a man so afraid of being powerless that he had mistaken cruelty for strength. He saw the world as a ladder, and was willing to kick down anyone, even his own family, to secure his footing on the next rung. You realize now that his hot-tempered shouting was not the sound of authority, but the clamor of a hollow drum. He was terrified of the life he'd come from, and in trying to escape it, he had almost lost the only thing that truly mattered, his connection to the very people he disdained. You looked out the window again. You saw a nobleman, his fine silk robe smudged with soot, help a farmer lift a charred beam from a pathway. You saw a group of monks ladling out porridge to a huddle of weary merchant servants. You saw the golden boar on its pedestal, no longer a symbol of oppressive wealth, but a silent witness to the night the temple almost died and was reborn. The fire, meant to be an instrument of division and revenge, had become a crucible. It had melted down the rigid structures of class and station, forcing everyone into a single unified category, survivor. The community, stripped of its titles and pretensions, had been revealed. This, you realized, was the most profound lesson of all. True strength was not in the decree of a king, the wealth of a merchant, or the ambition of an official. It was not a singular loud force. It was a collective, quiet one. It was the chain of hands passing buckets of water from the cistern to the pavilion roof. It was the kitchen staff, without orders, organizing themselves into a brigade. It was the 2 guards who had scrambled up the pole to help you, a stranger, a woman, a suspected criminal, because they saw a need and they acted. Real power, you understood, was not the ability to command, but the willingness to cooperate. It was the quiet murmur of 100 people working together that had drowned out the roar of the inferno. You had left your village a quiet stream, content in your small, predictable channel. But the flood of events had forced you over your banks. It had swept you into a raging river of fear, injustice, and violence. You had been battered against the rocks of accusation and carried on the current of chaos. Yet in doing so, you had discovered that a stream, when its force is concentrated, can cut through stone. You had learned to climb, to run, to think under pressure, to lie with purpose, and to face down a man consumed by fire. You were not the same Minju who had clutched her ledger on the cherry blossom trail. The world had barged into your small schoolhouse, and in response, you had been forced to become large enough to hold it. Your father turned from the window. He had been watching the courtyard with a farmer's steady gaze, assessing the damage and the recovery. He came and sat on the edge of your pallet, his large, calloused hand gently taking yours. "The land is scorched," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But the soil beneath is still good. The ash will even make it richer for the next planting." He looked at you, his eyes full of a deep, quiet pride that meant more to you than any royal commendation. "You did not just stop a fire, Minju. You showed them where the good soil is." His simple words held the wisdom of 1,000 scriptures. He was right. The structures had burned, but the foundation, the community, remained. It was stronger now, fertilized by the ashes of its ordeal. The lesson was not just for you, it was for everyone in that courtyard. They had been reminded that a village is not a collection of individuals bound by duty, but a single body bound by shared fate. When the fire comes, it does not ask for your title. You settled back, a genuine peace settling into your bones. The journey home would be long. Your body would need time to heal. But you knew, with an unshakable certainty, that you were returning to your schoolhouse with more to teach than just the shape of characters and the rhythm of poems. You would teach your students that a single brushstroke can be beautiful, but 100 brushstrokes together can create a masterpiece. You would teach them that true strength is not about the volume of your voice, but the depth of your compassion and the readiness of your helping hand. You would teach them that the world is a complex and often unjust place, but that the answer is not to burn it down, but to build it up, together, one bucket of water, one shared rice cake, one act of forgiveness at a time. The greatest lessons, you now knew, were not written in pristine ink on a perfect scroll, but etched by fire and washed clean by the collective effort to rebuild. You closed your eyes, the gentle music from the courtyard a lullaby of hope, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, you rested. The journey down the mountain was the slow, careful inverse of the journey up. A week had passed, a week of healing under the watchful care of the temple monks and your mother's fussing. The king's own physician had tended to your wounds, declaring your survival a minor miracle. You knew better. It was not a miracle, but a matter of physics and luck, a collapsing roof that had broken your fall, a pile of discarded tatami mats that had cushioned your landing. The gods had not softened your fall, the forgotten debris of men had. It seemed a fittingly humble salvation. Your father fashioned a walking stick for you from a sturdy branch, and you leaned on it heavily as you began the descent. Choi Sung walked with your family, a silent, hulking presence. He did not offer to carry you, nor did you expect him to. His role now was simply to be present, to walk the same path, his punishment, a quiet pilgrimage of shame. He carried your family's heaviest pack without complaint, his shoulders, once squared with false authority, now rounded with the honest burden of labor. The cherry blossom trail was transformed, the blizzard of pink snow was gone. In its place, a canopy of vibrant, tenacious green leaves stretched overhead, dappled with sunlight. The petals lay in thick, decaying carpets on the path, their sweet scent now tinged with the earthy fragrance of rot and renewal. It was beautiful in a different way. Not the ephemeral, dreamlike beauty of the blossoms, but the sturdy, grounded beauty of life carrying on. The branches, relieved of their floral burden, reached for the sky with a new strength. You felt a kinship with them. You, too, had shed a fragile outer layer and found the solid wood beneath. The path was not empty. Other villagers, their duties at the temple complete, journeyed homeward. But the atmosphere was different. There were no grumbles about taxes, no resentful murmurs. Instead, people spoke of the fire. They spoke of the guards who had formed the water line, the kitchen staff who had battled the blaze with pots and pans, the nobles who had torn strips from their silk robes to bind the wounds of commoners. They spoke of you, the scholar heroine, their voices a mixture of awe and neighborly pride. You would blush and look down, your shyness still a part of you, but it no longer felt like a cage. It was simply a quiet preference in a world you no longer feared. You walked slowly, your recovering body setting the pace. This deliberate pace allowed you to see things you had missed on the frantic journey up. You saw the intricate patterns of moss growing on the ancient stones that lined the path. You saw a mother stoop to adjust her child's sandal, her movements unhurried and full of grace. You saw two farmers, who had likely argued over water rights a month ago, now sharing a water skin and talking quietly about the coming planting season. Your mind, no longer consumed by anxiety or the weight of a ledger, was free to wander. You thought of Jeongnan. You pictured him not as the demon in the bell tower, but as the shy man who had admired the temple's architecture, his hands scarred with the honest work of his trade. His humor had been a shield, just as yours had been. You saw him as the boy who received a scroll in place of a father, a wound that never closed, a grief that festered until it burst forth as an all-consuming fire. His tragedy, you understood, was not that he was evil, but that he had been left so utterly alone with his pain. His final act, shoving you to safety, was a flicker of the man he might have been, a man who built things instead of burning them down. You carried his memory not as a ghost, but as a somber, silent vow to never let another's pain go unseen. When your village finally came into view, nestled in its green valley, a feeling of profound relief washed over you, so potent it made you stumble. Your father's hand was instantly on your arm, steadying you. Home. It looked exactly the same cluster of thatched roofs, the same thread of smoke rising from a communal fire, the same patchwork of green and brown fields spreading out around it, but you saw it with new eyes. It was not a small, forgotten place at the edge of the kingdom. It was the center of the world, your world. It was a place of substance, of connection, of shared history, written not in grand scrolls, but in the worn paths between houses and the calloused hands of your neighbors. Your return caused a small, gentle stir. Villagers came out of their homes, not with the loud fanfare of the temple, but with quiet smiles and concerned questions. The village elder, a man with a face like a dried apple, simply placed his hand on your head and nodded, a blessing more powerful than any abbot's chant. They brought you small gifts, a perfectly ripe pear, a cup of freshly brewed barley tea, a small pot of soothing balm for your burns. These were not offerings born of duty, but gifts born of genuine care. They were the currency of community, and you realized you were wealthier than any merchant. The first place you wanted to go, after reassuring your parents, was your schoolhouse. That single room, smelling of ink and old paper, was your anchor. As you pushed open the familiar wooden door, the scent wrapped around you like a comforting embrace. It was smaller than you remembered, yet it felt more significant than the grandest hall in the Bongyun Temple. This was not a stage for drama and intrigue. This was a garden where futures were tended. Your students, who had been given a week of unexpected holiday, came running the next morning. They crowded around you, their faces a mixture of excitement and concern, chattering about the fire, about the hero who saved the prince, not yet fully connecting that hero with their quiet, unassuming teacher. Then Juan, the boy whose artistic vision you had once privately mocked, pushed his way to the front. He clutched a piece of paper in his hand. He didn't show it to you with the boisterous pride of his melon tiger. He held it out with a kind of reverence. "I made this, teacher," he said, his voice soft. "You took the drawing. It was not a tiger. It was a woman, a small figure with wild ink-black hair standing on a rooftop. Below her, other small figures were passing buckets. In the background, a huge, angry orange fire raged, but the figures were not running from it. They were all facing it, together. The woman on the roof was not beautiful or grand. She was small and determined, her stick-figure arms raised as if to hold back the flames by sheer will. You looked at the drawing, at its clumsy lines and fierce heart, and your eyes filled with tears. This was not an abstract terror masterpiece. This was a story of community, of courage, of 100 small people doing a single great thing. Juan had not just seen a fire. He had understood the lesson. "It's a very good drawing, Juan," you said, your voice thick with emotion. You looked up from the page and met his eyes. "It's very strong. But do you know what the strongest part of the picture is?" Quote, he shook his head, his eyes wide. You pointed not to the figure on the roof, but to the clumsy, wavering line of people passing the buckets. This part, you said, this is the strongest part. Because one person, even on a roof, cannot stop a fire. But many people, working together, can. One hand is just a hand. But many hands, linked together, become a wall. Quote, you saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes, and in the eyes of the other children listening. You carefully placed his drawing not in a discard pile, but on the wall right beside your teaching desk, in the spot of greatest honor. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm, but the music was different. You still taught the children their characters, but you illustrated them with new stories. Not just ancient legends of dragons and kings, but stories of brave guards and resourceful kitchen staff. You taught them that the character for strength was not just about the power of a single warrior, but also looked like a person bending to lift a heavy burden, a burden often shared. Your shyness remained, but it was now a quiet pool, not a stagnant pond. You found yourself speaking up at village meetings, your voice soft but your words carrying a new weight. When two farmers began to argue about a stray goat, you didn't hide from the conflict. You walked over and quietly suggested they help each other mend the broken fence, turning a source of argument into an act of cooperation. They grumbled, but they did it. Your humor, once a silent companion, began to peek out. You shared quiet jokes with the village women as you washed clothes by the river, your laughter mingling with theirs. You even found it in you to tease Choi Sang, who had indeed returned to his family's fields. You saw him one afternoon sweating under the sun, his back bent, and called out, "The work seems to agree with you, cousin. The soil is a much more honest master than the tax ledger, isn't it?" He looked up, startled. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, and he raised a hand in acknowledgement. The wound between you was finally beginning to scar over, turning into strong, new tissue. One evening, as twilight painted the valley in soft shades of purple and gray, you sat on the step of your schoolhouse, simply watching. You watched the smoke curl from your neighbor's chimney, a sign of the evening meal. You heard the distant, rhythmic thud of a woodcutter's axe, a sound of preparation for the coming winter. You heard the laughter of children playing one last game before being called inside. Each sound, each sight, was a brushstroke in the masterpiece of ordinary life. The world outside this valley was still full of kings and decrees, of grand ambitions and the resentments they spawned. But here, in this small, quiet space, a different kind of kingdom was being built. It was a kingdom held together not by fear or duty, but by the invisible, unbreakable threads of community. Its foundations were not stone, but shared history. Its wealth was not gold, but the kindness exchanged in a passing greeting. You had walked a path of fire and returned to a world of water and earth. The grand lesson, you realized, was not about heroism or changing the world. It was about returning to your own small plot of land and tending it with a new and profound understanding of what makes things grow. You were a teacher, a quiet, humorous, shy teacher, and your world was the size of a single village. But you knew now, with a certainty that settled deep in your soul, that it was large enough. It was everything. The seasons turned, as they always do, indifferent to the dramas of humankind. The vibrant green of summer softened into the gold and rust of autumn. The harvest was brought in, and the air in the valley grew crisp, carrying the sweet, smoky scent of wood fires. The blackened scars in the Bongyun temple grounds were slowly being healed, with new timbers rising from the ashes. But the most profound reconstruction had taken place not in wood and stone, but in the hearts of the people who had survived the fire. One evening, as the first stars began to prick the deep indigo sky, the villagers gathered in the central clearing. This was a new tradition, born from the aftermath of the fire. Once a week, they shared a communal meal around a large, crackling bonfire, a deliberate act of chasing away the darkness, of replacing a memory of destructive flame with one of creative warmth. Children chased each other in the firelight, their laughter like the chiming of small bells. You, Minju, sat on a smooth log, a steaming bowl of millet porridge cradled in your hands. Your body was fully healed, the aches and pains a distant memory, but the events of that night were etched into you, not as a scar, but as the fine lines of a woodblock print, giving your character new depth and definition. Juan, the young artist, sat at your feet, leaning against your knee, contentedly sketching the dancing flames in a small notebook you had made for him. The village elder, his face a web of benevolent wrinkles, cleared his throat. The cheerful chatter subsided into a comfortable silence, broken only by the crackle and spit of the fire. "Min-ju," he said, his voice raspy with age but clear as a temple bell. "Some of the younger ones were not there. They hear the stories, but they do not understand. They see the scholar heroine, but they do not know the path she walked. Will you share it with us? Not the story of the fire, but the story of the lesson." Quote, "All eyes turned to you. A year ago, this focused attention would have sent a hot blush creeping up your neck, would have made you want to shrink into yourself. Tonight, you simply felt a quiet sense of purpose. You looked around the circle of familiar faces, illuminated by the warm, flickering light. You saw your parents, their expressions soft with pride. You saw Choi Sang, sitting with his own family, his large frame relaxed, his gaze meeting yours with a humble respect that was more valuable than any apology. You saw the children, their faces full of open, uncomplicated curiosity. You set your bowl aside and took a deep breath, the smoky air filling your lungs. "The story," you began, your voice soft but carrying easily in the stillness, "doesn't start with a fire. It starts with flowers, a blizzard of them. It starts on a beautiful path where no one was looking at each other. We were all walking in the same direction, but we were alone. Each family was trapped in its own worry, carrying its own sack of grain, its own private burden." Quote, "You spoke of the journey, of the resentment that weighed more than any tax. You talked about your cousin Choi Sang, but you did not use his name. You spoke of a man given a duty that set him against his own people, a man so afraid of their hardship that he built a wall of anger around himself. You spoke of him with a gentle compassion, explaining how fear can sometimes wear the mask of fury. Across the fire, Choi Sang looked down at his calloused hands, not in shame, but in quiet acknowledgement of a truth he had finally come to accept. And there was another man," you continued, your voice dropping slightly, "a man who was a master of his craft, who could build roofs to keep families safe and warm. He was shy, and he told funny, gentle jokes, but inside him he carried a pain so great it was like a shard of glass in his heart. It was a pain our kingdom had given him, a deep injustice that was never acknowledged. No one saw his pain, and so it festered in the darkness. He, too, was alone on his path. And his loneliness, his unheard grief, turned into a fire. You paused, letting the weight of that sink in. You were giving them not a monster, but a man. A tragedy. He thought the only way to make the world see his suffering was to make it suffer too, wanted to burn down a world that he saw as rotten. But a fire born of anger doesn't cleanse. It only consumes. It consumes the good along with the bad. It consumes the person who lit it." Quote, you then looked at Juan, at his notebook. The fire came, and it was terrifying. It threatened to take everything. But then something happened. The people who had been alone on the path, they started to look at each other. The nobles, the guards, the monks, the farmers. The fire didn't care about their titles. In the face of the flames, they were all just people. And they stopped carrying their own separate burdens. They began to work together. One bucket of water is small, but 100 buckets passed from hand to hand, from a nobleman to a farmer, from a monk to a merchant, that becomes a river. That river is stronger than any fire. You picked up a stick and drew a simple line in the dirt. One person. Then you drew another line next to it, and another, until you had a sturdy, cross-hatched square. Many people, bound together. That is a community. That is a wall. That is what saved us. Not a single hero. Not a grand plan from the king. It was the kitchen staff. It was the guards. It was everyone. Everyone who chose to reach for a bucket instead of just running. Everyone who chose to link their hands in the chain. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow on the silent, listening faces. You had given them back their own story, but you had framed it in a new way. You had taken the fear and the chaos and distilled it into a clear, bright lesson. You had taken their individual acts of courage and woven them into a single, beautiful tapestry of collective strength. The elder nodded slowly. A lesson paid for in ash, he said, but learned in the heart. A good lesson. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of shared understanding. You had not just told a story. You had reinforced the very foundations of their new beginning. You had given them a myth to live by, a reminder that their greatest strength lay not in their individual harvests or skills, but in the chain they formed together. Now, as the embers of that long-ago fire glow in your memory, let the story drift from that ancient valley and into this quiet room. Close your eyes. The world you live in is not one of royal decrees and grain taxes. Your hardships are not fought with buckets of water against a burning temple. But the fires are still real. They are the fires of misunderstanding that burn between people, the lonely griefs that fester in the dark, the fears that make us build walls of anger around our hearts. We all walk our own paths, carrying our own private burdens, often feeling isolated even in a crowd. The lesson of Minju, the quiet teacher, is not a relic of the past. It is a living truth. It is the understanding that the most fearsome dragons are often just men consumed by a pain no one ever acknowledged. It is the wisdom to know that true strength is not the shouting of a single, loud voice, but the quiet cooperation of many hands working in unison. It is the courage to see the humanity in those you disagree with, and to offer a bridge of understanding rather than a wall of judgment. In your own life, you will face your own fires, your own moments of chaos and fear. In those moments, remember the chain of buckets. Remember that the choice is always there, to run alone or to stand together. Remember that the most powerful thing you can do is to truly see the person next to you, to acknowledge their burden, and to offer your hand. For a community is not something you are born into. It is something you build. One act of kindness, one shared story, one moment of grace at a time. The enduring strength of the human spirit is not a solitary flame, a single hero against the darkness. It is a vast network of small, steady lights. It is the quiet resolve of ordinary people who, in the face of adversity, refuse to let go of each other. It is the teacher who learns her greatest lesson from a crisis, the official who rediscovers his soul in the soil, the artist who captures the truth of a community in a simple drawing. It is the profound and simple power of us. And so, as you drift towards sleep, let the gentle sounds of that peaceful village fill your mind. The soft murmur of voices, the crackle of a warm fire, the vast, silent turning of the stars overhead. Let the peace of that valley be your peace. Know that no matter how scorched the ground may seem, the soil beneath is still good. The ash will enrich it. And after the fire, a new and stronger life will always grow. Rest now. The lesson is learned. The world is quiet. All is well. The fire whispered its final stories for the night. Its light, a soft and gentle wash of amber and gold upon the quiet faces gathered around its fading heart. Your words, once spoken, did not hang in the air with the weight of pronouncement, but rather dissolved into the peaceful quiet, becoming part of the shared warmth, part of the gentle understanding that now bound your village together. No one rushed to speak, to fill the silence. They simply sat, letting the lesson settle, letting the warmth of the flame seep into their bones, a comforting counterpoint to the cool, evening air that was now drifting down from the sleeping mountains. The night itself seemed a sigh, a long, slow breath of contentment that rustled the leaves in the trees overhead. Slowly, as if waking from a shared and pleasant dream, the gathering began to dissolve. A quiet murmur of good nights, a soft rustle of homespun cloth as families stood and began their gentle journeys back to their own doorsteps. Your father placed a steady hand on your shoulder, and you rose, feeling the deep, pleasant weariness of a day well lived, of a story well told. You walk, slowly and without hurry, along the familiar path that winds between the sleeping homes, your father on one side, your mother on the other, a small, complete circle of quiet affection. Your walking stick makes a soft, rhythmic tap on the cool, moon-dusted earth, a gentle percussion in the hushed symphony of the sleeping village. The moon, full and serene, is a pearl adrift in an ink-black sea of sky, and it casts a light that is not harsh or revealing, but soft and transformative. It washes the familiar thatched roofs in silver, making them seem as if they are spun from moonlight itself. It traces the edges of the leaves with a gentle luminescence and lays a pale, shimmering path before you. You can hear the village breathing around you, a slow, deep, collective respiration. A distant wooden gate creaks softly as it is barred for the night. From an open window you can just barely hear the faint, trailing notes of a mother's lullaby, a melody as ancient and as comforting as the stars above. Each sound is not an intrusion, but a reassurance, a a small, perfect stitch in the vast, peaceful quilt of the night. Your own home is a welcoming shadow, its paper door, a warm, glowing rectangle against the darkness. Inside, the air is still and smells of dried herbs and the faint, clean scent of the tatami mats. Your mother lights a single, small lamp, its flame a tiny, dancing spirit that pushes the deepest shadows into the corners, leaving the room in a state of gentle twilight. On the wall, Juan's drawing is a soft gray shape in the dimness, a silent testament to the story that now belongs to everyone. There is no need for many words now. A quiet nod, a gentle touch on your arm from your mother, and you are left to the peace of your own small space. You slide the paper screen of your window open, just a little, letting the cool night air drift in, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the distant, clean fragrance of the pine forests. You can see the dark, immense silhouette of the mountains. Their slumbering forms a great, protective wall around your valley. They are no longer a barrier or a challenge, but a vast and silent guardian, their presence a source of deep and abiding calm. The world feels immense, yet you do not feel small within it. You feel connected to it, a single quiet note in its grand, peaceful composition. As you settle onto the simple palette, the world outside begins to soften its edges, its sounds becoming a gentle lullaby. The distant, solitary chirp of a single cricket is not a disturbance, but a small, perfect note in the vast and silent symphony of the sleeping valley. The gentle rustle of the leaves and the breeze that whispers through the pines is like the turning of a page in a book you no longer need to read, for you already know its peaceful ending. You feel the coolness of the woven mat beneath you, a pleasant contrast to the residual warmth of the day. The pillow, filled with buckwheat hulls, shifts and conforms to the shape of an old and trusted friend, offering its silent, steady support. And now, the story of Minju, the scholar heroine, begins to fade, its sharp edges blurring, its vibrant colors softening into the gentle pastels of a dream. Her journey is complete. The ledger is closed, its ink dry, its purpose served. The fire is out, its ashes now nourishing the soil. The lessons are learned, taken into the heart of the village to be lived, not just remembered. And so Minju can rest, and as she rests, you can rest too. Her peace becomes your peace. The quiet of her small room becomes the quiet of your own. Feel the gentle weight of your own body, the pleasant heaviness of your limbs as they let go of all their effort, of all their striving. Let the day release its hold on you, just as Minju released her hold on the burdens she was forced to carry. The anxiety, the fear, the need to be strong. Let it all dissolve, like petals falling from a branch, returning to the soft, accepting earth. There is nothing left to do. There is no path left to walk, no fire left to fight. There is only the stillness of this moment, the deep and profound peace of arrival. Your breath, a quiet tide, flows in and out, a rhythm that connects you to the breathing of the sleeping village, to the slow, ancient respiration of the earth itself. With every soft exhalation, feel a little more of the day's tension drift away, like smoke from a dying fire rising and disappearing into the vast, starry expanse of the night sky. The coolness of the air on your skin is a gentle caress, a soft reminder that you are here, you are safe, you are at rest. The world outside this quiet space continues its turning. The moon continues its silent journey across the heavens. But here, time has slowed to a near standstill. There is only the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your own breathing, a steady, peaceful anchor in a sea of tranquility. The last vestiges of imagery begin to fade away now. The silver moonlight, the dark mountains, the glowing embers, they dissolve into pure sensation. The feeling of warmth, the feeling of coolness, the feeling of being held and supported. The sounds of the night become a single, humming murmur, a deep and soothing drone that vibrates at the very edge of your hearing, a sound that lulls the mind into a state of deep and dreamless calm. Thoughts, like tired travelers at the end of a long journey, find their resting places and grow still. Worries, concerns, plans for tomorrow, they are all gently packed away and stored until the morning light. They have no place here in this sanctuary of deep and profound rest. You are drifting now on a slow, quiet river, carried by a current of peace. The banks of the river are soft, hazy shadows, and the water is warm and impossibly smooth. You are letting go, floating, trusting the current to carry you to the deep, silent ocean of sleep. There is only this gentle movement, this slow, easy drift. Down, down, into a soft and welcoming darkness. A darkness that is not frightening, but comforting. The darkness of a seed, resting deep in the rich, nurturing earth before it dreams of the sun. The darkness of a closed room where all is safe, all is well. Let the last echoes of the story be your guide into this peaceful realm. Let go of the need to listen, and simply feel the gentle resonance of the words as they fade completely away. The lesson is learned. The journey is over. The cloak of duty has been laid aside. The heart is quiet. The mind is still. The body is at rest. The valley sleeps under the watchful eyes of the ancient mountains. And you too can sleep, held in the cradle of the quiet night. Rest now. Sweet dreams of a peaceful land, a quiet heart, and a world where all is well. Drift away. Sleep now. Sleep.